Texas Panhandle, 1878. A woman stands behind a canvas screen in a dirt floor kitchen. She wrings a rag over a tin basin holding less than a coffee pot of water. The water is gray. Her husband used it. Her children used it after him. She is last. When she finishes, what remains will rinse the supper dishes. The movies gave frontier women clean calico and brushed hair. The basin tells a different story. Of all the ways ranch wives kept clean with almost no water, one was so stomach-turning that most historians skip past it. By the end, you will know which. It is not the one you expect. This was never filmed and rarely written down. It was buried with the women who lived it. Now, before we go any further, tap that subscribe button. Stay until the end, because you won't believe what comes next. We are not guessing at any of this. Ranch wives wrote it down. Mollie Dorsey Sanford kept a journal through the Nebraska Territory starting in 1857. Elinore Pruitt Stewart described it from a Wyoming homestead 50 years later with the same blunt honesty. Army wives at Fort Davis and Fort Concho complained about it in letters home. The Sears Roebuck catalog sold products designed around it. These are the sources, and the sources are not gentle. On the southern plains and the high desert ranching country, water was not a convenience. It was currency. A well could take a full season of labor to dig 80 feet down, 100, sometimes 200, before the water table answered. A cistern could catch the spring rains and run bone dry by July. Every decision a ranch wife made about her own body started with one question. How much water is left, and who needs it more than I do? Here is what that answer looked like, from the bottom of the list to the truth at the very top. Number 20. The pecking order of the bath. On a Great Plains ranch in the 1880s, Saturday evening meant 2 buckets hauled up from a well sunk over 100 feet deep. The wife heated 1 bucket on the cook stove. That was the entire water budget for everybody in the house. The father went first. Clean water, hot water, the best the house had. Then the oldest child climbed into the same tub. Then the next child, then the next, all the way down to the baby. The wife went last. By the time she stepped behind the screen, the water was gray and cooling and had already touched every other person under her roof. This was not poverty, it was protocol. Water was too scarce to justify a second filling, and the woman of the house put herself at the bottom of the order by custom, not by accident. The old saying about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater was literal on the frontier. Every single item on this list flows from this one reality. She came last. She always came last. And nobody questioned it, least of all her. Today, a person stands alone behind a locked door under 17 gallons of hot water and calls it a quick shower. That ranch wife got a tin basin of gray water and a rag, and she was grateful for it. Number 19. The Saturday night rule. A full body wash happened once a week at most, and many weeks it did not happen at all. Between Saturdays, a ranch wife's hygiene was a damp rag and a basin and nothing more. Elinore Pruitt Stewart, writing from Burnt Fork, Wyoming, around 1910, treated a weekly bath as perfectly normal. She was stating what every woman around her already knew. In summer, the gap stretched even longer, because heating water on a cook stove inside a sod house raised the temperature past what anyone could stand. So the season when a woman sweated the most was the season she bathed the least. Today, the average American uses roughly 80 gallons of water a day just for personal hygiene. A ranch wife in 1885 might see 80 gallons in an entire month, and that water was shared among 6 people, the garden and the livestock. One life against the other, and the livestock usually won. Number 18. The spit bath. Between those Saturday scrubs, the daily wash carried a name that told you everything you needed to know: a spit bath. A rag dampened with as little water as the woman could manage, drawn quickly over the face, the neck, the hands, and under the arms. Nothing else. No warm water, no soap, no second pass. The rest of her body went untouched until the next Saturday came around. A woman could go 6 full days touching water to less than 1/10 of her skin and consider herself reasonably clean. And the name was not a joke. In the driest weeks on the high plains of Kansas and the Texas Panhandle, a mother would actually dampen a rag with her own saliva to wipe a child's face, because every cup of water in the bucket was already spoken for. The well was 100 feet deep, and the rope was fraying, and there were 100 jobs ahead of her own cleanliness on the list of what mattered that day. Number 17. The soap that could burn your skin off. Ranch wives made their own soap from scratch, and the recipe was simple and violent. Wood ash boiled down into lye, then mixed with rendered animal fat. Beef tallow, lard, sometimes bear grease if a bear had been killed recently. The result was a hard, rough block that stripped skin raw on contact. It cracked hands wide open in winter. It stank of whatever animal had surrendered the fat. She stirred that mixture in a cast-iron kettle over an open fire, and if her measurements were even slightly off, the lye could eat through cloth or raise blisters on wet skin. She used that same soap on everything: her body, the family laundry, the dishes, the kitchen floor. One brutal product for an entire life. Dr. John Gunn's Domestic Medicine, the most widely owned medical book on the frontier, gave recipes for this soap as if it were a household staple. It was, and the hands of the woman who made it paid the price every single time. Number 16. One cloth for the whole family. In many ranch households, a single washcloth served every person under the roof. It was not washed between uses. It was wrung out and draped over a nail to dry. The same rag that wiped a toddler's face at dawn wiped the mother's body that evening. Separate towels were a luxury that required cotton goods, and on a remote ranch far from any mercantile, cotton arrived by freight wagon once or twice a year at best. The Sears Roebuck catalog of 1897 listed cotton toweling at 8 cents a yard, a price that made most ranch families choose between a towel and a bag of flour. They chose the flour. A personal washcloth was a comfort that belonged to a world these women had already left behind. The cloth they shared carried everything from one body to the next. Number 15. Hair washed 4 to 6 times a year. A full hair wash required more water than a body bath, more time standing still, more fuel burned to heat the water. Most ranch wives washed their hair once a month at best. In winter, when well water had to be hauled through snow and cracking ice, the gap stretched to 6 weeks, sometimes 8. Between those rare washes, the only solution was brushing. 100 strokes every night, pulling oil from root to tip, working dust and grit out of a braid that was never unbound during the day. The hair was never truly clean by any measure a modern person would recognize. It was managed. Catharine Beecher, whose domestic manual circulated widely on the frontier and sat on many ranch shelves, actually warned women against washing their hair too frequently. She called it a health risk. The advice aligned perfectly with what the land demanded, because the water to prove her wrong was simply never there. A ranch wife's braid carried everything between washes: corral dust, stove smoke, kitchen grease, the smell of every animal she had touched that week. All of it stayed until the next washing day came around. Number 14. Cornmeal rubbed into the scalp. Between those rare full washes, ranch wives worked cornmeal through their hair and down to the scalp with both hands, sometimes flour. The grain absorbed the grease and soaked up the oil that 100 brush strokes could not move. Then they brushed it out, stroke by stroke, until the meal fell away and the hair looked passable again. The problem was what came along for the ride. The same barrel that held the cornmeal held weevils and moth larvae. A woman could spend 20 minutes brushing meal out of her hair and find insects crawling near her ears the next morning, carried in from the pantry on the very substance she used to look presentable. The product she reached for to stay clean came straight from the food supply, and the food supply was never as clean as she needed it to be. We are not even halfway through this list, and already the water has run dry in the basin. But the worst of it is still coming. The one that sits at number 1 is something most of these women never wrote down in any letter or diary. And when you hear it, you will understand why they kept silent. Number 13. The rags she could not hide. Commercially manufactured menstrual pads did not reach American stores until the 1890s, and they did not make it to remote ranch country for years after that. A ranch wife in the 1870s and 80s used strips of torn cloth, washed by hand, and reused month after month after month. The washing happened in the same basin, with the same water, used for every other cleaning job in the house. There was no separate vessel set aside. There was no privacy. The rags had to be hung to dry somewhere out of sight, but in a one-room sod house or a cramped two-room ranch cabin, out of sight meant almost nowhere. The phrase on the rag comes directly from this practice. The silence around it in the written record is enormous, and that silence is its own kind of evidence. These women did not discuss it because there was nothing to discuss. It was simply what was done. There was no alternative. Today, a woman chooses from an entire drugstore aisle of products made for this purpose. A ranch wife had a torn strip of cotton and a basin of cold water, and she managed it without missing a single hour of work. Number 12. Kerosene combed through the hair. When lice appeared, and on a working ranch they appeared with brutal regularity, the treatment was kerosene. Poured onto a rag, worked through the hair strand by strand, left to sit on the scalp and burn. The smell filled the house. The chemical stung. And it was flammable. Women performed this treatment by lamplight in wooden houses, handling a petroleum product inches from an open flame with no ventilation in the room. A ranch wife treating her children for lice was conducting what a modern person would call a hazardous procedure, alone in a fire trap, with no safety equipment of any kind. The practice worked. The lice died, but more than one frontier newspaper carried a report of a house fire that started with a kerosene lice treatment gone wrong. Today, Americans spend over $4 billion a year on commercial lice products. A ranch wife's entire arsenal for the same problem was a tin can of lamp fuel and a fine-tooth comb. She sat each child on a stool, parted the hair, and dragged that comb through kerosene-soaked strands until the nits cracked between her fingernails. Then she did her own, alone, by feel, with the lamp guttering on the table and the fumes hanging in the air. Number 11. Teeth cleaned with soot and salt. There was no toothbrush in the house, no toothpaste, no baking powder dentifrice from the catalog. A ranch wife cleaned her teeth by dipping a rag in salt or in soot scraped from the inside of the cook stove and rubbing it across her gums and teeth until the grit did its work. The rag was often the same one she had used for the spit bath that morning. When no rag was handy, a chewed willow twig served as a brush. Dental decay on the frontier was not a question of if, but of when and how much. By 40, most ranch wives had lost several teeth. Many had lost most of them. The 1897 Sears catalog listed full upper and lower denture sets available by mail order, but the cost was more than a full month of ranch provisions. A woman's mouth betrayed her real age faster than anything else on the frontier. It was the first thing a stranger noticed, and the very last thing anyone would mention out loud. Number 10. No water at the outhouse. The privy stood 50 to 100 feet from the main house, out past the kitchen garden, downwind if the builder knew what he was doing. There was no water out there, no basin on a stand, no pitcher, nothing. A ranch wife used the outhouse and then walked back across the yard before her hands touched water, if she bothered to wash them at all. In winter, that walk was through drifted snow. In summer, through dust and heat. The water inside the house was in the kitchen, shared with cooking and drinking. The link between hand washing and disease was already understood in Eastern hospitals by the 1880s. On a remote ranch, that knowledge arrived a generation late, if it arrived at all. And even when a woman understood the risk, the infrastructure to do anything about it simply did not exist. The outhouse was the most visited building on the entire property, and it offered nothing for the one thing that mattered most. Between the privy and the kitchen, between the chicken coop and the bread dough, the same unwashed hands touched everything in that house, every single day. We have passed the halfway mark now. What is coming next crosses the line from unpleasant into truly dangerous. And the one at number 1 is still waiting at the end. Number 9. Vinegar where soap could not go. When the lye soap was too harsh for raw skin or the water too scarce to justify wetting a rag, ranch wives turned to vinegar. Apple cider vinegar, diluted in whatever water could be spared, wiped across the body with a cloth. It cut through surface grease. It masked some of the odor. But it left the skin smelling sharp and sour. And on a working ranch in July, that vinegar scent mixed with dried sweat and wood smoke and livestock into something no modern person would willingly stand next to. The vinegar rinse was considered an improvement over going without. Think about what that means. It means the baseline had fallen so far that smelling like a pickle barrel was a step up. And women used it without complaint because complaining required an alternative, and there was none. On a day when the well was low and the soap was gone and the nearest store was a 2-day wagon ride, that bottle of cider vinegar was the last line between a woman and giving up entirely. Number 8. Childbirth without a wash before or after. A ranch wife gave birth in the same bed she slept in every night, on the same sheets with no change of linen because there was no spare set. A neighbor woman attended if one lived close enough to reach in time. Otherwise, the husband stood in. There was no pre-delivery wash. There was often no post-delivery wash for days afterward. Mary Ann Goodnight, living at the J.A. Ranch deep in the Texas Panhandle in the 1870s, was among the most isolated ranch wives ever documented. The nearest settlement was over 100 miles from her door. Puerperal fever, childbed fever, killed frontier women at rates that would have been a scandal in any eastern city. The cause was direct. Infection entered through unwashed hands and unwashed skin and unwashed bedding. A woman survived the delivery and then died of what followed because there was not enough clean water in the house to wash the blood from her own body. This was not ignorance. This was the arithmetic of a dry country. The water simply was not there to give. A ranch wife in the Panhandle bled onto the same mattress she would sleep on the next night and the night after that. No clean cloth to spare. No one to tell her that the fever climbing through her body had a name and a cause that a single basin of clean water might have stopped. Number 7. The chamber pot 3 feet from her face. In winter on the northern plains, a blizzard could seal the door shut for days. The outhouse was buried. The chamber pot came out from under the bed and sat in the corner of the room, or right beside the mattress. It was emptied once a day when the weather allowed. It was rinsed with a splash of water but never scrubbed. The smell climbed into the bedding, into the clothing hung on the wall pegs, into the walls themselves. A ranch wife slept 3 feet from that pot every night for months. In a sod house with no windows open and no ventilation of any kind, the air by February morning was something that would stop a modern person in the doorway. And this was the same room where she cooked the breakfast, where she nursed her baby, where she sat in the evening and tried against all evidence to feel like something more than a body serving a house. That pot was the last thing she saw before she blew out the lamp, and the first thing she smelled when she opened her eyes. There was no escaping it. The cold kept her inside, and the pot kept her company. And by March, the walls themselves carried the memory of the winter. Number 6. Wounds dressed with tobacco and turpentine. A cut from fencing wire. A deep burn from the cook stove door. A fingernail torn half off, reaching into a feed bin. Every ranch wife treated injuries with what she had within arm's reach: turpentine on a rag, a plug of chewing tobacco chewed soft and pressed into an open gash as a poultice, kerosene dripped onto a burn, cobwebs gathered from the corner of the barn and packed into a wound to slow the bleeding. Dr. John Gunn's Domestic Medicine, the most dog-eared book on the frontier, recommended these poultices as standard treatment. Clean water for irrigating a wound meant hauling a fresh bucket and heating it separately. And on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of calving season, that luxury did not exist. Most cuts were bound dirty and left to heal on their own or fester. Infection moved fast. A scratch from a rusty fence staple could turn to blood poisoning within a week. The nearest physician was a full day's ride on horseback, and in many counties there was no physician at all. A ranch wife was her own doctor and her own pharmacist. Working with remedies a modern emergency room would throw in the hazardous waste bin. And more often than anyone cares to count, she got it wrong, and the price was a fever that ended everything. Number 5. One real bath a year. Once a year in the spring, when snowmelt filled the cisterns and the creek ran high, and the weather finally allowed a person to stand outdoors in open air without freezing, a ranch wife got a full, proper head-to-toe scrub, hot water, real soap. Every inch of skin washed thoroughly for the first and only time since the last spring. One day out of 365. The rest of the year was rags, basins, spit baths, and rationing by the cupful. Women wrote about that spring washing day in their journals with something close to rapture. They described the feeling of truly clean skin as if they were describing a miracle. That joy tells you more about how they lived the other 364 days than anything else on this entire list. One full bath a year, and it was worth recording in ink. That feeling of warm water over every inch of your skin, the feeling you forget the moment a shower is over, was something a ranch wife experienced once in 365 days. She remembered it vividly enough to write it down decades later. Number 4. Sharing the tub with the hired men. On a working cattle ranch, the bathwater did not stop with the family. The hired hands used the same wooden tub, sat in the same tepid water after every member of the household was finished. A ranch wife took her Saturday bath, knowing that within the hour, men who had spent the week in the saddle, caked in dust and dried blood from branding, would climb into the same water. She knew it. They knew it. There was no alternative, and there was no discussion about it. The well took close to an hour of hard pumping just to fill a single wash tub. Drawing a second bath doubled the labor and the fuel, and nobody had the time or the water. Privacy was a word that belonged to a place with indoor plumbing, and indoor plumbing was 100 miles away and still 20 years in the future. Number 3. The smell that never came out of the dress. Laundry required more water than bathing ever did. Far more. A full wash day devoured every drop a ranch wife could haul and heat from sunup to dark. Between wash days, which could stretch 2 weeks apart or longer during dry spells, clothing was worn without pause. Through sweat, through cooking grease, through wood smoke, through the dust and blood and dung of daily ranch work. The same dress, the same apron, the same cotton undergarments, day after day without ever touching water. The smell was not something that could be hidden or managed. It was the smell of a life lived body to body with cattle and fire and dirt and labor. A ranch wife walked into a Sunday church service in clothes she had worn every single day for a week or more. So did the woman sitting beside her. So did the man in the next pew. Nobody mentioned it because there was nothing unusual to mention. That was the ordinary smell of an ordinary life. And it would have stopped a modern person dead at 20 feet. Your great-grandmother's generation talked about wash day like it was holy for a reason. They remembered what happened when the water ran out and the wash had to wait. Number 2, skin that never fully healed. Bedding was washed even less frequently than clothing. Sheets, if a ranch wife owned any sheets at all, were laundered once a season. Wool blankets could not survive the brutal lye soap without coming apart at the weave. So a family slept in the same unwashed bedding for weeks, running into months. Scabies moved from one body to the next, night after night. Ringworms spread across a household, one child at a time, carried in the fibers of a blanket nobody could afford to wash. Bacterial infections bloomed and traveled through that shared bed like a slow fire. A ranch wife could scrub her own body raw on Saturday night and climb back into bedding that reinfected her by Sunday morning. The bed was the very last part of her household she might have hoped to keep clean, and it was the one part she could not. Today we wash our sheets once a week and consider ourselves behind. A ranch wife on the Llano Estacado in 1880 would have given almost anything for that single luxury. She never got it. The bed that was supposed to restore her body was the very thing that kept it sick. And now we come to the one I have been holding back since the start. This is the practice most ranch wives never wrote about in any letter or journal. Most historians mention it in a single sentence and then move on, but it was daily. It was universal, and when you hear it, every other item on this list will settle into a different and harder kind of sense. Number 1, the part of her body she could never truly wash. A ranch wife's most intimate areas, the skin most vulnerable to infection, most burdened by menstruation and childbirth, and the grinding physical demands of every waking hour were the parts of her body she had the least ability to clean. There was no separate basin set aside for the purpose. There was no warm water reserved. There was no product designed for it. No cloth kept apart from the household rags, and in a one-room house shared with children and hired men and a husband never more than a few feet away, there was no privacy to attempt it, even if those things had existed. The same rag that washed her face that morning washed everything else. Or nothing else was washed at all. The consequence was chronic infection that never fully resolved, urinary infections that burned and returned, vaginal infections that no remedy in the house could touch, skin conditions that flared with the seasons and retreated without ever disappearing. Frontier women lived with these as background facts of being alive, as constant as the wind. The infections were so universal they were not even considered illness. They were just the way a woman's body felt after a certain age. When physicians from Eastern medical schools finally began examining frontier women in the early 1900s, the rates of chronic infection they recorded stunned the profession. The cause was plain and merciless. These women could not wash, not because they refused, not because they did not understand, because the water was not there, the privacy was not there. And by the time anyone told them what the long-term cost would be, the damage had been compounding silently for years. That is where the record ends and the myth begins. Every item on this list traces back to one single arithmetic problem: the distance between the well and the body, the cost in fuel and time to heat the water, and the social order that placed a woman's needs at the very bottom of every priority. Eastern reformers of the 1880s and 90s looked at frontier women and blamed them. They called it laziness. They called it ignorance. Some called it moral collapse. But the General Land Office surveys tell a different story. Well depths of 80 to 200 feet across the Texas Panhandle, across the high plains of western Kansas, across the dry ranching valleys of Wyoming and Montana. The labor of hauling that water up, bucket by bucket, rope over a crossbar, fell to the women and the children. The math never worked. There was never enough water, and the women who lived inside that equation were not ignorant of what was happening to their bodies. They were rationing a resource that the land itself refused to surrender without a fight. And then came the people who made the lie look beautiful. The dime novels of the 1870s and 80s put frontier women in spotless cotton dresses and roses in their cheeks. They wrote heroines who bathed in mountain streams and stepped out clean as Sunday morning. Hollywood finished the job. From Shane in 1953 to Gunsmoke and Bonanza, every ranch wife on screen had a kitchen with running water that did not exist within 500 miles of the actual setting. Pressed gingham, styled hair, clean hands. Even the Sears Roebuck catalog, selling wash basins and toweling and cake soap by mail order, painted a picture of domestic cleanliness that its own shipping schedules made flatly impossible to maintain on a ranch 2 days from the nearest rail depot. The women who survive in the old photographs are wearing their best clothes, washed and pressed for the single occasion of the portrait. The camera never saw Saturday night. It never saw the basin with its gray water. The real record lives in what the women wrote to each other in private, when no editor and no audience and no man was looking over their shoulder. Those letters are still in archives in Austin, in Topeka, in Cheyenne. They are honest in a way that makes the movie version look like a cruel joke, and they deserve better than the silence they have been given for 150 years. So here is my honest answer to the question I put to you at the very start. The worst truth on this list is not the one that sounds most dramatic. It is not the kerosene, or the chamber pot, or the hired men's bathwater. It is number one, the quiet, daily, invisible fact that a ranch wife could not properly wash the part of her body that needed it most. And she carried the consequences of that in her own flesh, in silence, without complaint, for her entire adult life. The next time you turn a faucet and clean water pours out without end, without effort, without thought, remember that a woman not 5 generations removed from you would have stood at that sink and wept. She never said a word about what it cost her. She could not afford the time or the water. The work would not wait. And not one person who ever watched her story from a cushioned theater seat had the faintest idea what it took for her to get through a single ordinary day. Which one hit you the hardest? Tell me down below. And if you want the truth behind another part of frontier life the movies never showed you, the next one is already waiting for you.